Good afternoon, everybody. This is Marty from Dogs Blog in the noontime report of the morning session of the Frank Carson et al. Trial. Court was scheduled to start at 9 a.m. Jury was up around 9:11. Judge on the bench around 9:13, so I guess that's not too bad today. And we actually had some testimony in front of the jury today. Charlie Odell back on the stand, and I was disappointed that there was no testimony about Mr. Jimmy Jackson, the little people running around attacking Charlie Odell every half hour or something. Percy Martinez was doing cross on Charlie Odell, and he talked about his interview with Corey Brown on 2/7/13. It's February 7th of 2013. That was his first interview with law enforcement. He was in custody at the time. I believe this is where he was at the county jail. Also in custody was Mike Cooley at the county jail at that time. Cooley had told him in jail about the Frank Carson altercations. Charlie Odell had to constantly read the transcripts of his statements to the reports of the statements that he made to law enforcement. So it was almost every question that was asked, he had to review the transcript. And he had to review. He had told Corey Brown that Cooley had talked to him in jail about the Frank Carson altercations. He asked him in regards to the lights in his Intrepid, the dome lights. He said that they were told on that. He told Corey Brown that the Intrepid, and he knows his vehicles, it was not the one with the dome light on, as it didn't have a dome light. It was his Monte Carlo that had heavy doors. He said the dome lights were always on. He was asked about Keith Hobbs talking about Corey Kaufman missing, and there was an objection, and again, he did not recall the testimony anyway, so it didn't really matter. They went to a sidebar, and then he asked him again a little differently. Keith Hobbs did talk about what Mike Cooley did to Corey Kaufman. He said, yes, he did. He said, and he also talked about Keith Hobbs said that Mike Cooley likes to play with knives. Again, a sidebar, objections and sidebars, a long sidebars on this one. And it's one of the issues they're going to get back to. They don't like to really resolve issues in this court. They just keep delaying them and hope they go away, I guess. I don't know. He had talked to Corey Brown about Cooley saying that Corey Kaufman was borrowing money, or vice versa. I believe it's Cooley borrowing money from Corey Kaufman. He didn't recall, read the text. He said the text does not recall what he said at the time, so that he needs to hear the recording of what was said, and that's kind of how it went through all this testimony with Percy Martinez. And what they're going to do at 1:30 is bring him back and let him listen to all the interviews again so he could hear exactly what the words that came out of his mouth. He did talk to Corey Brown about going to Escalon to pick up Eula Keys, Keith Hobbs, and Mike Cooley. And he said it was a black, not silver Tempo that had broke down. That was in the end of March of 2012. He thinks he got out earlier in March, but the records indicate that he got out on March 26, 2012. He says he did not recall getting out on that date. Again, read the transcript. He says he still doesn't need to listen to the recording. He did not recall saying it was early a.m., but it was eventually determined to be around 3 a.m. And there was a comment made by Mike Cooley, said they just got rid of someone when he was in the car with him, and that's what the motherfuckers get for playing with my money. When he picked up Mike Cooley in Sonora, he did say they were in Escalon. He did say they were coming back from Sonora. He did not recall saying it was a Wednesday or a Thursday. Again, he was reading a transcript. He asked him about the lighting in the car, and he said he saw Frank Carson with his butt sticking out of the car, with his head inside the car searching, and asked him if he kicked Frank Carson in the butt, and he says no, Mike Cooley did that. There were some more objections to this, and then another sidebar. He was asked about the ride from Escalon again. There was an objection and another sidebar. He came back from sidebar, and they were talking about Frank Carson going through Linda Sue Barnes' car. And again, Frank Carson getting kicked in the butt. He said, no, that was Mike Cooley that did that again. And again, that's when the cops were called on that incident. In another interview on November 18, 2013 with Kurt Bunch, that's when he was in prison. It was unknown the last time he talked to Cooley, but he did see him in 2013 in jail. They had not talked since. Kurt Bunch asked about the Escalon incident, and he said Kurt Bunch had told him that he was confident that Mike Cooley was not involved, and asked if Sonora was a lie. And Charlie Odell said, no, it was not a lie. This is what he told me. For some reason, Judge Inigo called another sidebar. They're getting ridiculous in these sidebars. And when they came back, Percy asked him about Kurt Bunch, questioning him about Mike Cooley, Escalon, and picking him up. And Kurt Bunch had also asked about the dome light incident and which cars. And he said he went to buy a glass pipe that day of that incident at the house with the dome light on. And when he got pulled over on the way back, and then he saw the altercation when he got back to the house. He said he also told Kurt Bunch he saw some Hindus in the backyard. He did not recall if asked they were Indians or if he brought it up or who brought it up. Again, reading the transcript. And it did say that he said the people were Hindus or Arabs in the backyard. He saw those people in the backyard around mid-March. Again, he was in custody in mid-March. He did not recall being released from custody on 3/26 of 2012. Some of those incidents, apparently he did not actually see Frank Carson. He heard or was told about it. In the November 8, 2013 interview, he did not mention Frank Carson. He says he doesn't really remember if he mentioned him or not. Read the transcript to refresh. He told Kurt Bunch he was smoking a cigarette on the outside. The rest of them were smoking dope on the inside, and he had had enough dope, and they were all spun. He did not remember seeing Frank Carson at all. The incident that he had talked to Kurt Bunch about was that he saw some people on the other side of the fence, and they were working on working on the fence or working on the hole, and he said they were trying to trap somebody. There was a few incidents, and not sure which one that he was actually referring to. He said there were several, and he's loaded all the time. At this point, Charlie Odell had mentioned or said something to the judge, and then she said that he wanted to talk to his attorney. A break was called so he could go in the back and talk to Lou Wintz. When they came back from break, the attorneys were in the courtroom. Odell was still in the back. Jury wasn't up yet. And the judge is addressing the attorneys, saying they've kind of conflated some things. And she had read through the transcript during the break, and she was asked about Keith Hobbs saying Mike Cooley they were never really asked about Mike Cooley until he was asked by the DA in testimony. She says she doesn't have that. Defense attorney disagrees, but nobody's able to determine anything different apparently, so it wasn't asked. I personally thought it was asked too. So DA says it's an issue of prior consistent statement. And Judge Aniga, looked at her and says, "You're ahead. You might want to not question it." And Marlissa Ferrero took the cue and stopped talking. Marlissa Ferrero also noted that there some discovery in Fresno in regards to Praveen Singh that has been prepared and ready to pick up. They're sending somebody to Fresno to pick it up. It could not be sent electronically, and it'll be made available possibly this afternoon. And this is in some of the discovery available in the Singh federal case. Jury was called back up at 10:34. Odell brought back to the stand. Percy Martinez again starts questioning, and immediately he needs to read the transcript when he asked him about the November 18, 2013 interview. And he said he never mentioned seeing Frank Carson, but did see 3 Arabs. And when he was asked to identify any of the people, he said he can't. And he told Kurt Bunch in the interview that he was too spun out to recall that night. And then he also had told Kurt Bunch about the Dome Light incident. He had to read the transcript again. He didn't know Frank Carson's wife at the time. He assumed it was his wife. He said there was a woman there in the background that said she was going to call the cops. Again, he had to refer to the transcript. The Frank Carson incident. He told Kurt Bunch about being there. And he says it didn't really help his memory reading the transcript. Again, he would like to listen to the recording of the interview. Then again, read the transcript when he was asked by John Evers, asking about getting rid of someone, statements made by Cooley. Cooley did say that he said that he got rid of somebody in March of 2012. That was Mike Cooley's statement after the Escalon, picking him up in Escalon. And what he said was when he picked him up in Escalon, maybe, yeah. He says they seemed like they were spun out, referring to Michael Cooley, Eula Keys, and Keith Hobbs. He noted that they had a change in their normal demeanor, and they were very muddy and dirty, as was the car. Percy Martinez asked him if he was willing to lie to avoid a 25 to life sentence. He said absolutely not lie to avoid that sentence, but he was looking at 25 to life and ended up at 32 months. He was asked if Mike Cooley was upset with Odell after the Escalon, and he said he hasn't seen him, he doesn't know, and he says he's not afraid of Mike Cooley. Percy Martinez was done, and Attorney Hans took over Cross, and he told Corey Brown that he was released on March 26th of 2012. Which is what's backed up by the records. And he was asked about, it was the end of March when Eula Keys' car broke down in Escalon with Mike Cooley and Keith Hobbs in it around 3 a.m. in Escalon. He was called by Eula Keys, and he went to Escalon, and he saw that all were muddy and spun out, and Mike Cooley said he got rid of somebody. Corey Kaufman did owe Mike Cooley some money. Mike Cooley apparently had said something to that effect. That's what motherfuckers get for playing with my money. Mike Cooley said They were coming back from a pig farm up by Sonora to get rid of someone. He said all this information was told, and testimony that he's given was told to Kurt Bunch in November of 2013. He looked at several photos with Kurt Bunch, and he ID'd no one, but he said one looked familiar, but never told Kurt Bunch about any people, any specific people. Yeah, and he said he was never asked anything any further. He said he believed he did bring up 3 Hindus in the conversation, and now says there's 2 incidents where he saw some boards and barbed wire being laid by the back fence. There was a hole that went under the fence apparently, and he wasn't sure how many people that he told Kurt Bunch in November 2013 about those boards. He says he believed he did tell him about the barbed wire, but he wasn't sure about the boards. Again, reading through the transcript, and Hans asked him to look through the entire transcript of the interview to check when he had told Kurt Bunch about the boards and barbed wire. And he did find a spot where he says, well, there's no boards, just barbed wire. He did not tell Kurt Bunch about the lasers that were being pointed either. He said there was 2 different colored lasers being pointed at him. He was asked if people in jail constantly get deals for testimony as they're trying to give information to get deals, and he said yes, it's true. He was asked about his conviction for 288, that's child molestation, and he was charged with a victim under the age of 14 years old. A 47, which is a grand theft. A 290 registration, which is a registered sex offender. That was the violation that he was looking for 25 to life at. And he always had previous burglaries and some assault with a deadly weapon also. And he asked him again. Then he asked him about he made an agreement to receive 32 months after his testimony, and 32-month deal for his testimony. He was asked about his girlfriend Angie following the case online, and has talked to her about the case, and he got a very serious look on his face when he mentioned his girlfriend Angelina or Angie. He was asked if he learned from other sources like the newspaper or other sources in regards to some of this information. He did say there were 2 different colors of lasers, green and red, and he did not read or hear that from anywhere else. The lasers did come from the Frank Carson property, but unknown how far from back in. He couldn't even really tell how many people. He said there was at least 1. He never told Kurt Bunch about the information in regards to the lasers. He's seen Mike Cooley play with knives a lot. He loves knives, and he has seen Mike Cooley very angry. Jai Gohel went to start his cross, and Jai Gohel asked him in his current case, his charges are as a 290. He failure to register as a 290, which is a registered sex offender. He did not register like he was supposed to, and he was facing 3 strikes. This occurred around December of 28 to 2017. That's when he was taken into custody. And prior to his agreement, he was facing 25 to life. Today, now that he's made a deal, that he is facing a lot less. And prior, he was facing 25 to life in the 2 interviews with law enforcement, one at the jail, one at the Avenal prison. He never mentioned Frank Carson at Mike Cooley's house prior to the charges of 25 to life. There was the exposure to 25 to life. He was not sure which interview that Frank Carson, when he said what he said about Frank Carson, when it came up. He said there was dark-complected people that were in the driveway on one of those visits to the house. but he never mentioned that prior to his testimony. Only now. And he said that was when Frank Carson said all tweakers to stay off his property and they get what they deserve. He never said that to Kurt Bunch or Corey Brown. And he did say at one time he did flip the bird at the Frank Carson. He couldn't remember exactly which one it was. He thinks it was he was leaving when the cops were coming one time. And that might have been the day that Frank Carson was in Linda Sue Burns' car and told that Kurt Bunch, the tweaker incident was flipping the bird. He says, no, he didn't tell Kurt Bunch that about the flipping the bird in that incident. He never previously mentioned the boards and the barbed wire in previous interviews. And he talked about the night that Mike Cooley and all of them were smoking meth. He had had enough, and he stepped outside to have a cigarette. Said he had had enough, didn't want any more. Again, that was in the middle of March of 2012, but he did not get released until March 26th of 2012. And he told he couldn't be sure that he told Kurt Bunch what he saw in the yard. And he never mentioned any other instances to Kurt Bunch. The person he saw in the yard was a guy with a laser beam. And the first time he brought it up was yesterday in testimony. Michael Cooley, he was asked if Michael Cooley and Charlie Odell, are close. And he said, not really. He was asked where he got the clothes from, and he said if they were provided by the DA's office. He said no, they were provided by his attorney. He was asked if Michael Cooley was his street uncle, and he said yes, since he was 13. The death of his parents, Michael Cooley kind of adopted him as a street uncle. There was another objection about something, I'm not sure what, and there was another sidebar. When they came back, Jai Gohel asked him if he had prior for 245A1, which is assault and a deadly weapon to inflict bodily harm. There was a 1999 conviction for burglary, 459 burglary. He had the 2000 288A as a child molest with someone under 14 years. 2013 conviction for 487, which is grand theft. And he was facing for 25 to life, which he would do at least 80%, which makes it at least 22 years before he could then apply for parole. He asked him if that would actually put him at the rest of his life in custody, and he says, well, yeah, that's a good possibility. But now he's facing 32 months, and he's to be sentenced after he completes his testimony. He is in protective custody at the jail, and he was beat up 6 times between June. He said June of 2012 and August, but those dates can't be right because he was in custody. No, he may not have been in custody at that point, but he was in and out of jail so many times it's hard to keep up with it. He did tell the doctor on November 7, 2017, he was hit with brass knuckles. He did not recall telling the doctor that he was threatened because of he being a witness in the Carson case. Again, referring to the transcript that he couldn't recall to see if he told the doctor about the threats. He says he still doesn't recall telling the doctor about being threatened because of the case. He has an experience in being protective custody in jail status, and he gets beat up a lot for being a 288er. He says he is not in public protective custody due to the child molestation charges. He did see the Corey Kaufman bike on the Lander house, but he never talked to Michael Cooley about it. He was in custody with Michael Cooley after March or April of 2012 sometime. And he did talk to Michael Cooley about, apparently about the bike and some other things and the visits by Frank Carson. The jury went out at 11:45 for lunch. Judge Iniga was asking about what discussions had occurred in regard to the pig farm. Judge Odell said it was a separate discussion between Charlie Odell and Michael Cooley. And Odell told Corey Brown on February of 2013 something to that effect, and said that Mike Cooley said he was buried or something along that lines on a hog farm by Sonora, and that's where he apparently had gone that day. Also said he knew Corey Kaufman was dead and on the hog farm, he says, and that was on a transport to court from jail or something. A statement was made that he knew that Corey Kaufman was dead and buried on a hog farm. Marlissa Ferrer was arguing there was some improper questioning going on about when he had talked to Mike Cooley and Keith Hobbs and such, and Judge Iniga basically said Marlissa Ferrer did open that door yesterday when she asked him about conversations with Keith Hobbs and Michael Cooley. So the DA did open the door. It was a very open-ended. It was not a specific question, so it opened it up for the defense to inquire further in regards to these conversations. Marlissa Ferrer is still arguing there's no foundation and the Mike Cooley is not relevant. And she says it was a vague response anyway. Judge Iniga was trying to get a word in edgewise. Marlissa Ferrer kept talking, and Judge Iniga just allowed her to. And Zuniga said it was not a vague response to the, her question was very vague the way she asked it, and it opened up the door to all this. So she just wanted to keep arguing it. It just continued on. Defense is saying it is huge to the defense trying to third-party culpability of Mike Cooley. So they are impeaching Mike Cooley through testimony of Charlie Odell, and now she's starting on a long-winded rant, repeatedly saying the same things over again in regards to third party impeaching Cooley or not, or Odell, Cooley or not, and she says it has an adverse effect on the jury. Judge Zuniga simply said, "You asked a question, it opened the door." Judge Zuniga has also noted that the defense will probably have to put Mike Cooley back on the stand in regards to these issues, and we'll look at the objections and the things when Cooley is on the stand. But again, she said she opened the door. That was the end of the morning session. We're not going back in court until 2:30. Odell's going to listen to his interview recordings. There's 2 of them. It's about an hour long total. And so the jury's going to come back up at 2:30. So I'm not going to be there's going to be nothing going on until 2:30. Probably not going to let us in either until 2:30. Don't forget the podcast tonight.